Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for always coming back on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern to the Ben Stewart podcast. Today, I have not just a really good guest, somebody that's going to dive seriously deep into certain topics that you've heard the words of, like wellness, but will go deeper beneath the surface than you possibly looked at it before. His name is Josh Trent. Josh Trent is the founder of Wellness Force Media and the host of the top-ranked iTunes podcast, Wellness Force Radio. Josh has spent the past 18 years as a researcher, trainer, facilitator, discovering the physical and emotional intelligence for humans to thrive in our modern world. On his website, some of the best copy that I've seen, it says, helping humans heal mental, emotional, and physical health through podcasts, programs, and a global community that believe in optimizing your potential to live life well. This sounds like he's using the most modern of technology and the most ancient of ways, bringing them together and really looking at how we as humanity can thrive in this world exactly as it is. No more excuses. Can't wait for this one. Let's get right to it on the Ben Stewart podcast. All right, we are here. We are back on the Ben Stewart podcast, and we have Josh Trent, my man. I've been in that room before.
That's right, you have. Thanks for having me. This is a treat.
Yeah, this is great. We got Gordo over here pushing buttons, making us look good.
Doing my thing. Excited for this one, guys.
Thank you, Gordo.
My pleasure, guys.
You know, I said it right in the intro, wellness. It's a word that gets thrown around there often, but the content that I've gone through of yours, I really like the approach that I'm feeling. And it feels, so I was actually just listening to, I think it was the No BS podcast. There was two ladies.
Yes.
Really well done. I loved how you spoke to your journey getting into wellness. So I gave your background a little bit. Lead the audience into the story of what had to happen for you to eventually happen upon this, what seems to be a large thirst, a drive, something that compels you deeper and deeper into wellness.
You know what? What I'm feeling in this moment, ever since I was a little kid, I always had, as you said, the thirst. I just wanted to understand. I wanted to understand why people treated each other so poorly on this planet. And I couldn't get it. I can remember being just, very, very small, Ben. And there was a part of me that was like, hey, adults, don't you understand that the way you're treating each other isn't right? It was almost like my soul knew that there was something greater. And I got knocked around in my path a little bit, born into a family. My sole contract was to come into a mother that had a bipolar disease. My dad left home when I was 2 months old. So there was some deep contrast in the beginning of the journey. And my little nervous system didn't know what to do at that time. So I found this drug. It's called food. And it's a drug that many people use. And no surprise, without the right intelligence, Ben, without the right physical or emotional intelligence, flash forward, I'm like 18 years old. I graduated from high school. I didn't know what I was doing in life. 3 years later, I'm 280 pounds. I'm in this job that I hated. I was actually an automotive technician. And I was in a relationship that wasn't working. So it was like all signals were screaming, eject. And I sold everything I owned. I moved to Hawaii. And in Hawaii for about 6 months, I really started to be still. I didn't even know what that was, to be still. I didn't even know about meditation. I didn't know about consciousness. I didn't know about anything. But my soul was guiding me out there. And in Hawaii, I found the ocean. And it was like this beautiful feminine energy that I had never really experienced, a more trusting feminine energy. And I'm reflecting on this for the first time, like looking back 2004, 2005, my time in Hawaii. That was the beginning of my real wellness journey, because about 6 months prior, I had lost a lot. I had lost a relationship. I had lost really my health. I had lost my sovereignty. I gave away my freedom, essentially. And so from that secondary contrast, I had to really find, who is Josh Trent? What is wellness? What is the intelligence that's guiding us all? And obviously, man, looking back is perfect. 2020, I can see I had to go through these insane ordeals to understand what wellness really is. And it's an inside job. It's a state of mind. It's a way of being. It's a belief. It's a faith. There's so many different ways that I've learned to be well. And then I found personal training in Hawaii. I did that for 10 years. And when I was done with the training industry, you know, like 10,000 hours with clients, I left the training world because I really felt my time was done. And I didn't know what I was going to do afterwards. Like, I left training. I was like, what else do I do? That was my skill set. Went to corporate America, committed spiritual suicide for a couple of years, got a beautiful gift of being fired. And it was both in a moment of sheer terror and liberation that my journey with podcasting and Wellness Force really began.
Dude, I love that. The thing that came up for me is I used to live in Hawaii, and I'm curious around, like, I bet this was past, I think I remember your story, it was past age 21. It was like 21 was the brick wall, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
21 was a brick wall, and then it took me 3 years to actually shed the beliefs and really the construct that I had learned, that many of us learn, and that is, if you make money and you have a good job, then everything's going to be okay. But the soul satisfaction turned into really a form of spiritual suicide. And actually, what happened at 21 was unique. So we can pull the e-brake and just flash forward from 21 to my time in Hawaii 3-4 years later. When I was 21 years old, I was drinking a lot. I was using alcohol as a way to pacify all the messages that my somatic intelligence was telling me. And it was, get out. You're destined for something more. There's something greater. But I wasn't listening. And when I was 21, I was drinking at a party, which is what a lot of us do in our 20s. And I'll never forget, Ben, I was holding this red party cup, and I looked down, I saw my belly pouring out of my body, and I put the cup down, and it was the first time I had ever really had a connection with God, with higher intelligence. And I just got this message, and the message was, there's more to life than this. There's more to life than this. And in a moment of disgust and also another form of liberation, I slammed the cup down and I ran home drunk for like 3 miles. And when I got home, I opened up the computer, and I think I typed in something like, how do I be healthy? And that led me to find a lot of different mentors, Paul Chek, what personal training even was. And it's been the ultimate journey. So it took me 3-4 years actually to let go of the safety, the perceived safety of having a quote job, which really there's no such thing as safety. And when I went out to Hawaii, that was when I really started to feel freedom and liberation coming online.
Interesting. So that sounds like a profound moment. It was a profound moment where you experienced something mystical, beyond yourself. Then you did your drunk marathon, which is quite impressive, by the way. And then from there, you used technology to connect with a community of people that were lighting the way. You know, we've had Paul, and we've talked about Paul on this podcast quite some. We talked about him on your podcast when I was on there. And so you found a community that helped light the way. What I'm liking about this is, you know, now I was in Hawaii when I was younger, and I really had a deep connection with the ocean, one that I long for now living in landlocked Tennessee. And it was deeper. I didn't actually have a name on it at that time. There was a lot of racism towards the Howleys when I was there. I was young. My teacher hated me. Yeah. So, and that was actually a gift, you know, a very beautiful gift. But it wasn't until later, when I was dating somebody in Brazil, that I came to know the Orishas, and they believe that the waterfall, Oshun, and the ocean, Yemenja, these are entities. They have an awareness, they have a consciousness. And that was the first time that I put a name to this thing that I've felt my entire life. So I really like that aspect of it. And I guess what I'm driving at here is, you go through all these stepping stones, and then you found something with the brand title of Wellness Force. And what I love about that is but as you're talking about it, you do talk about, so you acknowledge your weight, you acknowledge your drinking, but you're touching upon emotional elements there. And you're also connecting with, there's something that you connected with, a safe feminine in Hawaii with a real connection to the ocean. Where does the mystical, or does the mystical come into this journey of wellness for you?
Wow. I've never really considered that. So that's beautiful. And I think I was trying to do my best to honor the mystery before I even knew what mystery was. And the mystery was these feelings, these guideposts that we all get before we actually take action. And so for me, when I think about honoring the mystery or something mystical, it was something that drove me. Maybe it was the initial slamming down the party cup and feeling love for myself. Maybe that was the first time I even understood what love was, or the beginnings of what love was, because that was the mystical energy or God energy or consciousness coming through almost like a beacon in the blackness of night, so that I would actually take this journey to love myself. And I think that's really probably the biggest barometer for me this whole time, even now at 41. If I'm honoring the mystery and I'm listening to what's being whispered to me instead of what's sometimes being shouted at me, my life is going to be more on the path of God, on the path of consciousness. And I don't, when I say God, I want to be careful, and I'm sure your listeners understand this. I'm not talking about a bearded dude in the sky. You know, I'm talking about an energy that we all feel when we hold our children, or when we see our parents or our loved ones or our pets, or when we see a hero in a movie. Like, that feeling of love cannot always be articulated perfectly, but that is honoring the mystery, and that itself is mystical. So the beginning of me really connecting with mystic energy was that moment with the party cup, slamming it down, running home, going to Hawaii, following that little guidepost inside of me that I didn't exactly know what it was, and I didn't have the words to describe what it was. But I knew that I had kind of like the initial stage of the hero's journey. So I think long answer to your short question, but there's many layers in there too.
Yeah. You know, it's such a recognizable path as well. What's interesting is like I've had moments like this, but it's nice how you show there's either a foot coming down on the ground or a fist coming down on a table with a cup in it, you know, very symbolic of a moment of no. Okay. Like I've probably known on some level no more, but this is when I say it. This is when I mean it. And the running home and the immediately engaging, you know, because I imagine you did it that night. You didn't sleep on it and then wake up and like, no, still want to change and then type it into the computer. You probably typed it in immediately.
Sure, but it had been knocking for a while, right? So yeah. So alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography, shopping, these are all tools that we fall into as undeveloped souls that really pull us off the path of loving ourselves and knowing who we are. And so that moment for me, I think, just to reflect on your awesome question, that truly was the beginning of it all, because I was doing everything I didn't like. I was not in alignment with my soul in any way possible. And so there was this moment of like, enough, you know, almost like that scene in The Matrix where Neo puts his hand up and he just goes, no, and the bullets fall. We all have that. We're all Neo. All of us are, with our own unique journeys. So for me, that was the symbology of the cup slamming on the table. Like, I will not put this soul decaying, really soul atrophying substance in my body anymore, because the message inside of me is yelling so loudly that the pain of me drinking anymore would be so much worse than the pain of what's coming out of me, that I have to actually listen to this pain. Otherwise, I'm just going to kill myself. I'm just going to be in a space where I'm not only disassociated from myself, but I'm not honoring the mystery. I'm not honoring me. I'm not honoring Josh Trent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the hero's journey a few times. I love this because what I'm driving at when I'm speaking about wellness, a lot of it is the narrative and what we believe about ourselves, what we believe is true, can be possible about ourselves. And so what I love about that, when you bring up Neo, is, you know, he was lonely at the beginning. You know, he felt this longing for something he couldn't put language around, or he couldn't describe it. It seems like in the hero's journey, like sometimes you have the Frodo who's perfectly content and then gets kicked off onto a journey. And then there are a lot of those others that there's something they're longing for and they know it until they can name it, until that somehow graceful intervention comes where you like, oh, that's what it is. You know, you can put the language around it. You watch a movie and it just sets the perspective right, or a psychedelic, or in your case, breath work is a big thing that we've talked about that I know that has radically transformed you. these interventions. And, what's interesting is it feels like the soul is primary to it. The soul is speaking to you all the while, but then there needs to be this moment of enough default mode network coming down offline or something, some kind of intervention that's like enough with the patterns. You're not even listening to what's actually speaking to you. And that's what that moment feels like to me. To turn this into an actual question is, it feels like in your case that kept speaking, but it's obviously once you get the message, it's not going to stay on the old message. It has to evolve to lead you further down the corridor. Mm-hmm. You eventually landed at also building a business, Wellness Force, a media, a content creation business, which is great. It's very cutting edge as well. So you name it Wellness Force. We're kind of touching upon wellness and what is that. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of this force, this presence, but I want to understand, why did you name it Wellness Force?
There's so much there. Can I comment real quick on what you said with the Matrix? Because I was thinking about that white rabbit the whole time you were talking. Like, yes, we do have these moments on the journey where we're separated, we're initiated, and then we return. But before we ever get initiated, we have to have the courage to move towards the initiation. And sometimes we get presented the white rabbit so many times, but we just don't have the courage, Ben, to follow it. We don't have the courage yet. We haven't summoned or earned, or this is where we get to honor the mystery even more. What makes people, I've been feeling a lot into this, and what made me follow the little clues, follow the nudge to go out to high, follow the actual initiation of the 3-stage journey of the hero's journey. And I think for me, it was pain. It was pain. And when I'm presented with so much pain, I start to look towards, well, how do I get out of pain? What brings me pleasure? What is the opposite of depression for me? It's expression. So that for me was like many, many white rabbits. And like you, I share a love of the ocean. So I just had to throw that in there because, man, it's so important for us to also pay attention to where the white rabbit is and these little clues that the universe puts in our place. But also it's okay if we don't see them the first time, and like we can have compassion for ourselves for not like getting one sign and following it perfectly. So I had to throw that in there before I talk about Wellness Force, because I think that's part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I also want to interject what I sense when you were saying that as well is like, when you mentioned pain, I was also feeling like behind that, there's this knowing that you're not only worth more, but you came to give and to gift the world with more than you're presently expressing. It's like, there's this secret hope. Even inside the hopeless, there's this secret hope that we uncover, that we've always had hope and we've always known our true potential. And sometimes we drug it out and we drink it out. I went through my phases of that for sure. But I like how pain was such a messenger to you, because especially when talking about like Wim Hof with the pain signals, the pain proteins, right? It's just the way your body communicates to you. So when you do the breathing, which is something I also want to get into, when you do the breathing, it decouples that pain protein and it allows you to see beyond the previous limitations of the horizons you were on. So it's interesting that pain was that messenger for you, because sometimes it shuts people down, sometimes it turns people off or on. So with that, Wellness Force, and then I want to get into breath, but the name Wellness Force, what's the significance?
So looking back, just like the tattoo on my arm that I'll reference when we talk about breathing, there are little things that I do, and I don't always know 100% why I do them, because I'm following that piece of mystery that we're talking about. So the name wellness combined with force, if you look at the duality of power versus force, Hawkins' work, everyone has probably either heard of that book or maybe referenced that book in some way. But true power is something that comes from a very calm place. The force of the ocean, or force itself, is so raw, so primal, like so incredibly almost overwhelming at times, that it needs a guide. It needs a guide to actually channel it and use it in a healthy way. And so when I look at the unhealthy dynamics of force, it's like white knuckling. It's trying to squeeze a square peg in a round hole. So for me, Wellness Force has always been and will always continue to be my own evolution of tending to myself and sharing that authentic tending of taking a force that we all have. We're all born with wellness. We're all born with a level of wellness that's so incredible, so insanely powerful, but we forget and we block it and we numb it and we put things in front of it. So for me, in real time, I'm just feeling into this. I've never actually explained it this way. Wellness is the guide for the force that guides all things. Because when we're well, we don't make decisions to use that primal force in a way that hurts us or others.
Dude, I love it. I love it. You know, it's really interesting, and I'm glad you explained it that way. The wellness is really like, can you have this force and effect? Like, I think of electricity, somebody who's gotten electrocuted before. Electricity is this force that you can tap into. It's there. It has a few requirements, pre-requirements for it to become what it is and active. Let's say if you get electrocuted inside your body, but you're right. It needs confinement. It needs that restraint. There's things that restrain it, and that's what actually is necessary for a good artist. An artist and an art project needs confinement. A hose confines the water and only gives it one way to travel. You know, it gives it, you know, more unique and sophisticated functionality. So I like the way that you explained that there. It's directing this massive force that is always and ever present. With that, there's something about breath that in all traditions that ever allude to or even come close to wellness, the breath is talked about. In everything that's ever talked about spirituality, breath is talked about. In any mom, any father who's ever tried to calm down their child, right? Breath is talked about. It's ageless and timeless. I would love to know, for sure.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's
too.
a really good one. Yeah.
Let's talk about that whenever you ask the question, because I'll share with you what I found in my research for breath work in our program, and also what happens to a child when you plug their nose. It's fascinating.
Dude, just shoot. We're already on.
So as we step into this like unimaginably large cavern of interesting topics around breath, think about two things. First of all, just ponder this, everyone. If in the beginning there was the word, then there was breath before the word, because you can't speak unless you have oxygen. Otherwise, you can't speak. So breath was before the word. So breath truly is life. That's the first thing. And then the second thing that nature shows us with her insanely beautiful wisdom is that we are born into this world to breathe through our nose. If you plug a baby's nose, and I did this a few times with my son, if you plug a baby's nose, they start to choke. Now, why is that? Why does a baby start to choke if you plug its nose? Because we are brought into this world pure, without any obstruction, and we are naturally supposed to breathe through our nose. We breathe through our mouth and we start clenching our jaw and we start doing vertical breathing and upper chest breathing because we deal with stress, capital T, lowercase t trauma. So two very powerful, completely absolute objective truths about breath is that before the word, there was breath. And if you plug new life into the world, if you plug the new life of the world's nose, it starts to choke. So that right there is the biggest gong of reality for all of us here on earth, to the severity and also the beauty of the breath.
I love it. Dude, there's one thing, because there's another question on breath I want to get to. There's one thing that made me think of, and I caught that too, how profound that was, Gordo, saying that, like, you know, we also give our children their breath. We don't just teach it to them.
Yes.
And they pattern it out and express it out differently with many of the same characteristics and behaviors probably, but we give that to them. I was just reading this thing this morning, and is a meme that just came across my feed. It's by Lane Redmond. All the eggs a woman will ever carry form in her ovaries when she is a 4-month-old fetus in the womb of her mother. This means our cellular life as an egg begins in the womb of our grandmother. So it's like this weaving pattern, because like the egg that we will come from is present in our grandmother 4 months into our mother's gestation.
That's wild.
It's this weaving pattern. We're woven together in ways we don't understand. And this is, bringing me back to the Hawaiians. Why do they call haulis haulis? Do you know that?
I don't.
Ha'ole. ha, the breath, ole, without. So the howlies, the whiteys came over
The
there.
mouth breathers.
The mouth breathers, we came over there. And what did we do also? We shook hands. What do they do when they greet? They put their foreheads together and they breathe each other's air.
Yeah.
And they knew that as normal. And it's not like they had no clue about the Fiji Islanders and surrounding islanders. You know, it's not like they didn't have any clue at all about the greater world out there. And I get into that in some of my work, but to stay on point, the interesting thing about that is how closely so many of these ancient traditions look at the breath as actually being something that weaves us all together. It does connect us. And then it's also here in the now. And that's why in the now, when you put your forehead together and you breathe each other's air, you've just shared now with one another.
I remember too, Ben, when you were on Wellness Force, you talked about the Lakota and how they pause and they breathe and they listen. Taking a pause and taking a breath shows respect for who's speaking, shows respect for who you're with. And a lack of breath when I'm waiting for someone to talk so I can just get in there, it's like a lack of respect. And I think like the breath really breeds respect. The breath is a respectful tool to ourselves and to other people. So apologize for interrupting you, but I was listening to you and I was breathing and I was thinking like, this is a really important point that most of us have lost the art of doing. The art of being is like that pause and slowing down and really breathing, through our belly, like that, the hara, the space between our belly and our sex organ. Like we don't access that very much.
Well, I would say, and I would add, I guess you could say this is speculation or it's more the quote unquote conspiracy angle is if you look at the systemic design that we currently have, a lot of it is very much designed to teach or maybe subconsciously create short breathing humans, right? Very anxious, short breathing humans, constantly go, 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 short attention spans. And the more I think about it, guys, I always like to look at it from sort of a macroscopic systemic design angle, and breath, either by accident or by design, has been very much stripped out of society. And from, indigenous cultures all over the world, it seemed really honored breath or water, these, sacred things that make us. And yeah, I mean, that's just like, as far as like designs and solutions, and I'd love to touch on this at some point later with you guys about like designing new communities and what are the core sort of foundations and ethos of these communities, like breath, water, life. Like breathing is not only just like something that keeps us alive, but has so many levels to it when you really start to look at it this way. And we need to get that more design back into the systems. I mean, that's my 2 cents on it.
What's interesting, before we toss it back to you, Josh, is I think of design as also, because I feel a lot of this is very easily explainable with the right understanding of just how sitting became a thing. Like, how did sitting as our predominant posture most hours of the day become a thing? And there's many ways you could tease it apart, but it's like only after you lose something, like the power of breath that our ancestors, and I'm talking like also like the Native Americans, like all the traditions that walked this earth before, they were literally walking this earth a lot more than we were, right? We're sitting and spectating through technology for the most part, and that's our culture today. It's a vast growing trend. So the interesting thing is not just as we're looking at these communities, thank you for the question, as we're looking at these future communities as being possible examples, part of it might be even design of the way we sit, design of how we schedule our days, how we break up the monotony of sitting. Because I mean, I have to sit a lot for a job.
Yeah.
I break it up as intelligently as I can with movement and also with breath. And there was a very interesting thing that I was also thinking about when it comes to breath and breathing patterns in general, is the way that you breathe around people subconsciously programs them. So in the same way that, like, if you're very excitable and you're always talking at the top of your breath and you're not really letting people get a breath in, like that's excitable, that's genuine, that's authentic, that's in the moment. But there's something that happens like in a movie. If I'm designing a movie, if I'm dropping like a medium-sized bomb, I'm okay to skipping just about right to the next soundbite. But when I drop a bomb and I want it to sit and breathe, like usually I give that breath. I give that moment where somebody has to, naturally they're going to breathe 3 times before they hear another word. So the interesting thing is I love that you brought up that about the Lakota, is because I mean, they got talking done, right? You know, it wasn't like every single time somebody said something like, you know, somebody lifts their leg and farts and goes, oh, excuse me. Somebody takes a breath before moving on and saying something. Like it was when there were sacred moments, when there was a really profound thing that was resonant in the room. Everyone would honor it with that breath. Like, ooh, wait a minute. Breathe that in, however that's reverberating in the air, get it in your lungs, get it through those, you know, get it into the body somehow, fractalize it inside of us.
There's a few things that I was feeling into when you were speaking. One of them was, when did we go from round tables to square? When did we go from tables where we could all see one another and there was nowhere to hide, to a table that was long and rectangular with a leader at one end and all the staff or all the help or all the people that person was leading on the sides? And I think that's a really big part of, to go to Gordo's question and also to reference whatever else we're talking about. As we think about the power and the art of the breath, we also have to think about how we're sitting and the way that we're sitting, you know, the construct of the table we're at. Are we sitting at round tables in community? Or are we sitting at square tables where there's a one or two perceived leaders and the rest of us are just listening? What I felt from you and what I felt when you shared about the Lakota was, most likely they sat around one another. They didn't sit at a square table. And if they did sit at any kind of table, it was probably round. So we're designed to be round. We're living in the world. The world is round. And we're applying box thinking, box sitting to a world and a way of being with one another that's designed to be round.
That's so interesting. It's funny how, you know, we get off on, and I love these tangents that lead us into this. I didn't expect to go into these corners of what breath is, but it's interesting because we're talking about design. We're talking about shape. And in biogeometry, you know, anyone of Czech's guys knows about biogeometry. Shape is very important to how it literally molds frequency. It generates its own frequency, so you can have a room, if designed well. Yeah. If you have a room, well, exactly. You can look at the cymatic patterns that show up on an acoustic guitar. It's very specific. So if you design a room like that, right, if you design the right room, it's going to bring about things that either cause you to want to relax, you know, want to go to sleep, more creative in the morning. I love this direction that we've gone into with breath. And Josh, I want to touch base on what you've found to be the most fascinating that you didn't expect out of breath work. And I also want to get to some practicalities. We've kind of generalized a little bit. I want to barrel down into some of your patterns, not just breathing patterns, your protocols, what you kind of discipline yourself with, but how and when and why you introduce it into your days.
Yes. The how is because for the first 20 years of my life, I didn't breathe. I literally didn't breathe. And I was born, I was less than 5 pounds, put me right on antibiotics, lots of antibiotic use my whole life. That led to a chronic sinus infection. And when you have a chronic sinus infection, guess what airway is cut off? Your nose. And so for a long time in my life, I didn't know what it was like to really smell things properly, to breathe properly. So there was something in me that wanted greater wellness, greater health, because of the ways that I was kind of pulling myself along and not breathing properly. So man, when I found breath work, it was actually in 2016 with Mark Devine, a guy that leads a program called Unbeatable Mind. And it was in Carlsbad, California. And I was laying around on the floor. We were doing what's called warrior breathing, which, by the way, to talk about what we were saying with the construction of community, we were doing circular breathing, which is what a lot of Wim Hof breathing is. You're doing circular breathing. So I was breathing in a circle. And I noticed that even though I wasn't necessarily breathing perfectly through my nose, I had water coming out of my eyes. And I'm like, what is this? Why am I emoting? Like, what is going on? Like, what is this breath doing for me? And I felt such a cathartic release that it sparked my curiosity. And I started to go to more workshops and more trainings. And this is almost 6 years ago now. And so the why of breath is because when you don't have it, you might think that that's normal. You might think that going through the world, not breathing through your nose like I did, is a normal thing to feel. But what happens over the course of time is we get carbon dioxide poisoning. We don't know what it's like to take full belly breaths. We don't get enough oxygen to our blood. We actually become unwell and we have dis-ease because I had, and a lot of us do, cut off an airway that is supposed to be open. And guess what? That was cut off because I was ignoring the natural wisdom, and that is antibiotics wipe out our gut biome. They make us have, for some people, fungus infections and lots of things that go on. Sinus infections, a lot of times, are fungus infections, and they're a byproduct of antibiotics, which I didn't know until recently. So that's the why we breathe. I breathe because when I was in a space for so long where I didn't know what it was like to breathe through my nose, I did that training in 2016. I found the extreme power of what it really means to breathe through my belly. I mean, that, Ben, was probably the first time I ever really took a belly breath, like actually understood what 360-degree horizontal breathing was really meant for. Breathing into my kidneys, breathing into my diaphragm, all the scientific things that I know now that were occurring, but in the moment I just felt how good it was and how peaceful it was and how cathartic it was. And so that's what sparked me to then travel to Thailand and do my training. And I think your question had three parts, but the first part of the answer is, why do we breathe? We breathe because that is exactly what is going to make us well. We can't breathe unless we're pulling from the well within ourselves. And if we're not breathing properly, then we're eventually going to manifest disease. We're eventually going to manifest unwellness.
Yes. So like times of day, and how do you introduce it, like, consistently? How do you stay on the ball with it, keep up to date with it, if you will?
Well, I love having people to the house. I have a sauna and a cold tank. And so you better believe you're going to know how to breathe properly when you're in cold water, especially if it's like 39 to 45 degrees. You really have to survive. So breathing can help us survive, and breathing can help us thrive. It can do both depending on whatever lever I pull. But really, what the specificity here I'm talking about is this: breath is our only autonomic lever that we can pull. In our central nervous system, and on each side of the branch, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, and I know on your show you've talked about this, but just a tiny little snippet of science here. The parasympathetic side of that autonomic nervous system or automatic nervous system, that is the side that allows us to rest, digest our food, connect, open our hearts, be at peace, feel well. On the other side of the autonomic or automatic, there's the sympathetic. That's when we have to, like, run from a tiger, or what pounds our heart when we're about to step on a stage and speak to 10,000 people, or when we're in traffic and we get cut off. So now that we understand that, we're all wired for this. And especially if we're caught in this default mode loop, most people, when they wake up, that is the absolute most powerful time to do your breath work. Because when you first rise, whatever was cleaned, because the brain washes itself at night, whatever was clean from your brain is like circulating through your body. Whatever thoughts you had, whatever dreams you had, whatever you absorbed, whatever you were dealing with or what was looping, it's there when you wake up. Some people, Ben, when they have chronic anxiety or chronic depression, they'll wake up and it's the first thing they feel. It's the first thing they think is these thoughts that hurt them. And the best possible way to clear out those thoughts isn't to check your phone, isn't to go crush a hardcore workout, bro. It's to actually go to a space, stack your spine, hips, and head in a straight line, and breathe through your belly for 7 minutes or 20 minutes, because you're going to recirculate, you're going to recycle, you're actually going to get out the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the chi, the prana, however you want to describe it, from your body. So very first thing, and I'm talking like before you even get out of bed. So for me personally, I'll come outside the garage, I'll sit either in the sauna or before the workout, and I'll do a 7-minute practice. And my favorite practice in the morning is a grounding practice, because if I had a night where maybe I had dreams that troubled me, or I'm having a stressful time in life, the box breathing is actually what can ground us. The circular breathing is what pulls energy up to the creative space. So I like doing box breathing first thing in the morning in a practical way. And it doesn't take long. I mean, really 3 to 7 minutes of box breathing can change your entire day. No doubt.
Wow. How profound is that just 3 to 7 minutes at the beginning of the day sets things off on the right trajectory, right?
Yes.
It's best when you're going on a journey to check your car before the journey, so it almost seems like that's one thing. It's like it's a tune up for the vehicle before the journey, much more suited before the journey than after the journey.
Dude, so
I
we're
like
not supposed to just slam the gas pedal and throw back 4 liters of coffee and just show up to work? We're not supposed to do that?
Unless it's 1984 Monte Carlo. No, you're not supposed to.
Okay.
You know, what was coming up for me before was when you were saying about, I don't know what age it was for you, but you had your first real 360 breath and you felt what that meant. And for years and years and years of your life, you went through life without truly knowing in this life that sensation, what that brings to you, what a gift that is, and how accessible it is. So the interesting thing is, I would love to know, you said you put at least 10,000 hours in training people.
Sure.
So this is like mostly or 100% one-on-one. You're working with people. I'm sure you worked on them with their posture and how posture can allow for breath. You know, because one of the main things that I think is, we were talking about sedentary posture. Now talk about systematic, institutionalized reasons as to why people are tight in their intercostals. They are hyperkyphotic, so they're hunched over, their shoulders are pitched forward, their chest is collapsed, they're pressing down their ribs, they're limiting their diaphragm, they're limiting the expansion of their lungs. And I've heard estimates from a guy who was a scientist and a body worker in Oregon saying that up to 30% of our oxygen intake can be out the window. You can pretty much kiss it bye-bye with an extreme hyperkyphosis, which is basically what we're working on. We're trying hard at this in society, this hyperkyphotic curve. So I guess what I'm saying is, I would love to know, and we don't have to get into specific like ways that you broke them out of that. I would love to know, as you worked people out of their restricted breathing patterns, what do you start to notice as far as changes in people's life, their lifestyle, their wellness, the quality of their life?
Couple things. The first big thing is that most people, when they come, because we have a program called Breathe, Breath, and Wellness, and it's at breathwork.io. And a lot of times the biggest question I get is, should I do my breathing laying down, or should I do my breathing standing or sitting? I believe that people should start understanding what a diaphragmatic belly breath truly is. And I think the best way we can learn what that is actually by laying down. It's by laying on our back, Ben, because when you're on your back, think about it, your posture is pretty solid when you're laying down. Your shoulders are back. You're not kyphotic. Your scalenes are more relaxed. Your sternocleidomastoid isn't clenched. You're more retracted. So your bellow, your diaphragm, and this is another point, the diaphragm's 360. The diaphragm is a dome that sits right here. And that dome needs to breathe all the way back into our kidneys. So if we have too much mesentery, which is the fat around our organs, or if we have a postural deviation, like we're so slouched, I think we've all seen these people where it looks like they almost have a bubble on their back.
Yeah.
Well, they need like massive foam rolling, opening their chest, bringing their body back. Right now, I'm actually sitting on a chair, and it's a meditation chair. It allows me to sit in lotus position. So as I speak with you, my head, my shoulders, my hips, they're like a ruler. And I have a pad in front of me that gives me a cue to know when I'm not breathing, because when I'm not breathing, I'll slouch forward. So I love this chair. I found it on my own research. Your initial question was, what happens to people when they don't have the awareness of what we're speaking about? What happens to them is, slowly over time, Ben, they will start to become victims of their own stress. But that stress is both environmental and also postural. Because over the course of time, like let's say you had a 30-pound backpack that was put on the wrong way. That backpack would pull you forward. So you would, just by gravity itself, gravity is always trying to push us down to earth. So our posture is there to, and it's designed to actually have us resist gravity, not fight gravity, but like resist gravity. And when we resist gravity, my clients that I've worked with and all these students in the Breathe program and myself, the very first time you take a big belly breath, you will feel what it's like to be up straight, to either stand or lay or just be straight. And there's something so profound by doing that. But most people are blocked by what I call, and what many people call, a reverse breathing pattern. So in the inhale, when we breathe in through our nose, our belly needs to go out. But for a lot of people, when they take a breath in through their nose, their belly goes in. So they've actually learned through trauma or stress or learned parental example behavior to breathe backwards. And those are the people. Those are the people that can benefit from breath work the absolute most. So everybody with us right now, take a big breath in through your nose, put your hands on your belly. Breathe out through your mouth. When you breathe in through your nose, if your hands didn't go out, you have a reverse breathing pattern. You'd be so surprised, Ben, how many people struggle with this. It's millions and millions of people that just don't have that awareness. So when we start to, for your initial question, unlock the posture, open up the front of the body, stand or sit or lay with our chest open and our jaw relaxed and our front panel relaxed, you start to get what's called a cathartic release. And it could come very small, it could come very massive. But either way, when you release the 30-pound backpack that's pulling you forward and you open up your body and you sit, stand, or lay tall, it's impossible for you, if you're breathing correctly, to not have some type of a release. Even if it's micro or macro, it could be, oh, I'm actually not that stressed out anymore. Okay, I'm not as triggered. Or, wow, I actually just had a memory of trauma that popped into my psyche out of nowhere. I mean, the power of this, the posture, the breathing technique, all the things that are involved, I dork out on it because I love it. I think it's really fascinating. I think it's really cool how this just basic thing, like I help people breathe. I help people breathe well. It's like, wait a minute, what? You help people breathe well? And it's fascinating, man. I love it.
So as you're working with people and you've noticed these changes, it makes me want to go a little deeper because what a lot of our listeners are looking for is also some of the same kinds of cathartic releases that you're talking about. We know that these are valuable. We know how they can open us up, and they can stand to be points that realign our trajectories when we get a deeper insight on ourselves. So the ones who had, and maybe like I'm using too few data points to try and, get at a larger point, but the ones who had massive cathartic moments, I'm curious, did they seem to be ones that surrendered to what was happening more? Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Yeah, they surrendered. This is a great point for me to make some clear cuts between the styles of breath and the specificity of breath. I believe, like when we talked about, you asked me, you said, when's the best time to do breath work? And I said in the morning, because in the morning is a meditative breath work or a proactive breath work. That's phase one. Phase two is acute breath work. That's when you have a fight with your spouse, go on a stage, whatever. It's when you feel your breath start to leave you. Some call it like a panic state or a fright state. That's acute breath work. And then there's something if people want to journey, which is maybe what you're talking about right now. I think it is. When people want to journey, they will actually do more of like a 30, 60, maybe 90-minute breathwork session. And that's very cathartic, right? Catharsis breathwork is what people see with the Wim Hof or with Stan Grof's breathwork. I mean, he was trained by Leonard Orr, the same thing with Dan Brule, the same thing with a lot of masters in this space. They were all trained by the father of breathwork, and that was Leonard Orr. I'm sure he had one too. I just don't know who it is. But the reason why cathartic is so important is because if you follow Bruce Lipton's work, if you understand true somatic release, or right now we have a big buzzword in the space, right? It's called being trauma informed. Trauma informed. I hear this a lot. The only way you can move trauma or energy through the body is if there's permission. Like the body has to get permission some way. And it's either going to come from the mind being turned down through the default mode network, or it's going to come through a really skilled practitioner to help somebody turn down the default mode network so they can actually give them their body permission to let something go. And that's when people cry. That's when people have these cathartic experiences. But there's a process to get there, man. And I would not recommend that people just like sprint to an ayahuasca ceremony or sprint to a catharsis breath work unless they have spent some time in the other two phases of breath work. I think there needs to be a graduated approach to that.
Have you studied any of the progressions of yoga? Because yoga is a science. And there's also Tai Chi. There doesn't seem to be as strict of, I take that back. I don't want to speak for that. But as far as like the outward look of yoga, the Indian Vedic form of yoga is this school where you are graduating to different levels of breathing. So you're posturing your body and breathing as naturally as you can in those postures, as well as, you know, doing the contemplative exercises. Have you looked into that as far as when do they start getting to some of the cathartic types of breath work?
I have not studied that specifically. That's really, really interesting. I know that just like in any science of movement or any science whatsoever, there's like the pupil phase, then you become the facilitator, you know, you became the trainee, and then you become the master. That's a great question. I've never really studied that in depth of the yogic arts to see what that progression of breathwork teachings might be, but it's a phenomenal question.
Yeah, it's just a model, and I try and look at models as helpful, but no one of them is fully complete or the one. It's just interesting because you mentioned a sequence that could best serve people, and I definitely agree with that. And I think we've gone deep on breath, and we can maybe pause there a bit, because I wanted to ask a question about you getting into media, and so content creation. Your just a quick how you got into it. What are some of the things you had to overcome? But the main thing I want to ask is using your online presence as some form of a path. Like, how have you crafted what it is that you spend a lot of, because I can tell you spend a lot of time on your brand, on your content. So how have you crafted such a beautiful company that you've built around you to not get in the way of the path you know you were put here to be on?
Well, I just keep leaning forward. I mean, I literally just, I keep leaning into curiosity. I know that might sound at first here, you might be like, what do you mean you just use curiosity? I really mean that. Like when you came to my home and in the studio, or anybody that comes to my house and I interview, I'm just truly curious. I just want to know, like, what's this person all about? What are they doing here? Why are they doing it? How are they serving people? And I ask myself those questions pretty much every day. So I think that is like the bedrock of the answer for your question. I am constant. If you look back, you know how you can look in the Wayback Machine, you can see like somebody's website like 7-10 years ago. If you really looked at the progression of Wellness Force, you would see that we have pivoted a lot, because my truth, my interest, my genuine, honest curiosity has changed a lot. But I will tell you that the core of it all has been that question that I felt when I was a little kid that I told you about. And that is, why do we treat each other like this? Which brings a bigger question and a mirror for me in this brand and this company and Wellness Force Media. And that is, how do I treat myself? How do I think of myself? Do I love myself? Do I treat myself with kindness? Do I treat myself with curiosity? Like, why am I triggered? Why am I wanting to be successful? Why do I want to interview? Why do I want to put out content? And the reality for me is, what else am I going to do unless I'm making myself better? I'm going to learn from other people how they're doing the same. And I'm going to share that journey of intelligence, whether it's physical with the breath or emotional from people that are masters in that arena. Like, that's what drives me forward, is that genuine curiosity. And I'll tell you the two things that come after that. One of them is, can I keep my heart open? Can I keep my heart open? And when I close it, when I get triggered, when I'm not my loving self, do I have the courage to come back around and own it in my business, with my relationship, with my son? Those three things, that is like the constant protocol for me of, all right, am I putting out something I really believe in? Am I really showing up as my fullest self? Am I actually allowing myself to be on a camera? That's been a big one that's come up recently, because I put on some extra weight with the having a child and moving and things like that. And I've noticed like this little lesson has come up. Like, are you worthy to be on camera? Of course I am. Of course I am. But it's in the process of moving forward that I think a lot of our wounds and our stuff comes up, especially if you have a big dream, especially if you're a creator, especially if you want to have a media channel. I mean, there's nowhere to hide when you're being honest. Like right now, this is live. There's nowhere to hide. Totally. Right? We are where we are. So that's really the bedrock for me, is those three things. The curiosity, can I keep my heart open? And can I have the courage? And this is sometimes the hardest one. Can I have the courage to come back around when my heart wasn't open? And can I be curious about why it wasn't open and do the work to reopen it? And it's a constant process.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You know, for me, that sequence of constantly checking back in with myself, I've noticed it is the very process that I set out on, which is the awakening or the expansion of consciousness, the ever unfolding knowing that you can have when you start moving in that direction, seems to consistently bring, or has historically for me consistently brought, a slight bit of anxiety, because I'm always so meticulous about who I am, how I behave. You know, like I am my own boss and I'm always looking over my own shoulder.
Yeah.
And the anxiety that brings, and so I've teetered around with playing with that and noticed that, like, no, you know what it is, as much as the anxiety sucks, it's not, you know, like what I started noticing was that when I'm not over my shoulder like that, then some other kind of issue seems to crop up. So it's like I either take the anxiety, which keeps me a little bit more honest and humble with myself, and it seems to put me on that fast track, even though it's ruler smacked on knuckles for talking out of turn or whatever it might be, rather than, oh, it's all good, don't worry about it, you know. So I'm curious with you, what are some of the tiny lessons you had to learn about yourself on the road to your own wellness? As far as, like, what have you had to acknowledge about yourself that you didn't want to see before, and you could totally see, well, that's why I was ignoring that part of myself, and I'm so glad that I got to see it. And then I want just, like, you know, some kind of sense of, like, what superpowers did you discover in yourself once you started allowing yourself to go through this process and be more transparent and honest and humble?
Sensitivity.
Vulnerable. Yeah.
Sensitivity is what I've fought for a long time. And there's still remnants when like I'm feeling sensitive, because sensitivity is a close neighbor to vulnerability. And I think I grew up in East County, La Mesa. I played football where, you know, PUSSY was like the main thing. Same thing with cars, right? Cars and PUSSY and beer. Like, I came from this narrative and this contrast where it wasn't exactly accepted to be sensitive. So later on, I found out in my life that I have HSP tendencies, right? So I guess I would identify as dude. Sorry, I had to throw that joke. I had to throw that joke in there with all the pronoun stuff going on. But I identify as an HSP because I am highly sensitive, and I thought that for so long. Like, so when you ask me that question, boom, first thing that comes up for me, I'm a sensitive man. And being a sensitive man has its bonus, but it also has its challenges, because as we look at the landscape of what it actually means to be a man in this modern world, it's changed so rapidly and so just top down, bottom up, top down. It's changed so much to really define what it is to be a man, that I think the new masculine is being formed through men that are sensitive. But this is the key. We have the capacity to know when to turn on our sensitivity and when to cut with a razor and get things done. And that capacity, that toggle switch for me, is a constant learning curve. Because if I'm left to my own devices, I'll just like connect with people and learn about them. And I can kind of lose part of myself, right? Just talking to people and learning about them. So my sensitivity is a gift because I feel like it makes people really comfortable. I feel like it gives people the space to share what's on their heart or have some cathartic moment, which made me a great trainer. It makes me a great facilitator. It makes me a great podcast host. So that's also my superpower. So the very thing in paradox, the very thing that I resisted for the first 20, almost 30 years of my life was my superpower. And I bet you if people take a deep enough inventory of their emotions and of their heart, the very thing that you are fighting is your fucking superpower. Because it was for me. It's what makes me all the money. It's what makes me have the path forward, is the sensitivity. So that's both the plus and the minus of being a sensitive man in today's modern world.
I love that. Thank you. I want to mention a comment that came through from James Welch. He said, talking of curiosity, is good breath work linked with weight control at all? And I'm wondering how you would approach that question.
100%, because but it won't come right away. It's not like you're going to breathe and lose weight the next morning. But when you're breathing properly, you're lowering cortisol. And as you know, the pancreas and the functionality of the pancreas, when you're not breathing properly and you have elevated cortisol, eventually you're going to tax your pancreas so much that you're going to turn yourself into a diabetic. But it's cumulative, Ben. Like all these things, whether it's eating foods that aren't for your metabolic type, or eating foods that hurt your gut microbiome, or getting in fights all the time, or drinking, or addiction of any kind, separation from self. Breath, I think, is the pathway that connects all these things that are making us gain the weight in the first place. Because when you start breathing correctly, you'll start to feel. I'll share something that just happened. I had an edible, which is something I never do. I rarely do this. I had an edible at this men's retreat recently, and I thought, okay, I'll just eat this tiny little square. And it turned out to be really fucking potent. So
every edible story ever.
If anybody's ever eaten
3
edible,
hours
you know
later.
what I'm talking about. So I say goodbye to the men, and I go in my room, and I was sitting there, and I took 3 of the most juicy, delicious, beautiful, healing breaths I've taken in a long time. And it was like a month of stress just unraveled from my body within 3 breaths. And I could feel the cells in my belly. I could like really feel my body. And from that place, I woke up and I looked in the mirror the next morning and I was like, wow, you look like you lost something, right? It was emotional weight that I had lost, and emotional weight manifests as physical weight. So bear with me here because this is a bit philosophical, but the construct of the mind and the body is the same thing. It's all a construct. The body is a subconscious mind. So if my body is wearing extra weight, it's just because my mind is trying to get order out of chaos. So that's what I just learned about myself again at this men's retreat. So the answer to the audience member's question, 100%. If you want to go deeper, you can actually quantify this. Take 3 weeks, take 21 days like in our Breathe program, and actually step on the scale each morning. And if you're doing your breath practice in the way that I designed it, you will let go of emotional weight. And a byproduct of you letting go of emotional weight, whether it's spinning default network thoughts, I'm not good enough, life sucks, those thoughts, that emotional impact is what drives us to be addicted to food, to eat things that aren't good for us. There is a direct, powerful correlation between the thoughts that we think and the foods that we crave. We don't need science to tell us that, but it does. And we also intuitively know that. So if you're looking to let go of weight physically, you first must look at, can I let go of weight emotionally? Can I let go of the weight of these thoughts that are just crushing me, and that are the things that are stopping me from breathing and that are driving me to the unhealthy foods? Because I'll tell you, when you start breathing, especially when you're doing the longer journeys, or even if you're doing the cold therapy, these are the things that when you start to really breathe what's here and now in the present moment, there's nowhere to hide. You're going to feel how overweight you are. You're going to feel how stressed you are. You're going to take stock of the stress that's in your system. I think about it 2 ways. The inhale through the nose is where we take stock of our stress. The exhale is when we let our stress go. And if we do that enough, we'll start to create a vacuum. You know, Alan Watts calls the vacuum in nature something it abhors. So anytime chaos is trying to find order, there's a vacuum. And if we have chaos inside of ourselves, breath is the most powerful vacuum to suck out the chaos, because the chaos is what's making you gain the weight. And it's not just always about the physical.
You know, that's true, because they're in our breathing patterns, they become more chaotic when they're more rhythmic. And especially when they're more rhythmic, usually that means there's more intention there. Not always. Sometimes, you know, people just actually, through various other means, they hold less chaotic breathing patterns, it seems to me, because you notice when I actually hear people breathing before and after breaths, it's actually something that stands out to me, maybe more than other people, I would imagine. But I'm tuned into it because I've had to edit it so much in film, edit my own voice, that I notice these breaths in other people. So I also notice when I take a breath right before a word and it stresses the word out. You can cut out the breath and then you can still hear it in the word. It's interesting about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, there's one more question that I wanted to get into, because it brings us up to date. And one of the next questions I had to you was just about, regards to wellness post 2020 in this world that we're in today. But the question was from Marlon Turdu saying, what's the influence of these scamdemic masks on our breathing technique, as she writes it? Will our unconscious breathing be negatively influenced? I would imagine everything you do with your breath is negatively encoded somehow. I would love to hear your thoughts on the masks. It doesn't have to be heady or scientific, but I just know you could feel that one well.
Yeah, we're killing ourselves.
There you go. There you go, Marlon.
Mic drop, we're done. No, we're killing ourselves because think about what an animal does when it releases stress. And I'll give this example because we're all animals and we've forgotten that we're animals. We're half beast, we're half spirit, Ben, as you know. So when I'm not honoring the animal, when I'm not allowing my animal or my physiology to do what it naturally does, it's going to be really, really challenging for that vessel, my meat suit, to actually hold health or wellness or well-being. So right now, everyone, maybe you could even take a piece of paper. When you exhale on a piece of paper, the piece of paper should move. Duh, right? Logic. Also, it's completely objective. All of us can see that, and all of us saw the paper move. If I have something in front of my mouth that I have to breathe harder into, it's going to cause stress over time because I have to tighten my TVA. I have to tighten my corset more to breathe out. So everybody knows that if you're running with a mask on, it's the same thing for your lungs and for your nervous system as if you were running with a parachute behind you. It's going to be a lot harder for you to run or walk or move or communicate. But we are pacified. When a child is crying, some parents stick a piece of pacifier in their mouth. And the same thing happens to us with these masks. It's a tool for pacification. It's a tool to keep you muzzled. It's a tool to keep you quiet. And it's a tool to keep you in line. And what's the best way to keep somebody in line? Cover their mouth, cut their expression, and start to stress them out with the very thing that's supposed to relax them, which is their breath. So this is a hot button for me. And I mean, I have some anger coming up right now because I'm so angry at what is being done to our community, our brothers and sisters. And like we talked about on Wellness Force, of course, I can understand. I can have compassion for why people wear the mask in fear or why people would wear masks in a surgical setting. I think that's actually legit. There are certain times where it's totally appropriate to wear a mask, but not when you're in the park with your son. That's not an appropriate time to wear your mask. That's not an appropriate time to muzzle yourself, to literally sedate your expression and sedate yourself through doing unconscious breathing. Essentially, a mask is a muzzle to make you breathe unconsciously. And it's retraining people to breathe through their scalenes, through their upper chest. And as Dr. Belisa Vranich calls, it's training people to do vertical breathing. We are designed to breathe horizontally. Like when we breathed earlier, Ben, where I said, inhale through your nose, fill your belly like a balloon. That's how we're designed. So the reason that this sparks, it's not anger actually, because below the anger is sadness, right? So it sparks sadness in me. And that sadness is something that sometimes it really allows anger to come forth as a vessel for the sadness to be expressed. So I'm sad that we're being forced to wear masks, but even more, I'm sad that people are allowing it. I'm sad that people are allowing it. And that's really what I feel about the masks.
Very good way to feel that. Yeah. And I appreciate that question, Marlon.
It's an awesome question.
Well, I mean, like you ask somebody who wears glasses, right? Sometimes it can just become a part of your, your architecture. Sometimes you feel naked without it. You hear these things, but the bottom line is that's truly correcting something. When you look at it societally, it's truly correcting something. And, it is an interesting time of history that we're in. But it is, I sense exactly where you're coming from. However it came out, it's genuine. And I think that's actually what's being called for more by personalities, which is why I love that you're doing what you're doing and you're being as open and honest and talking about the things that many other personalities, beautiful, and I love them, they decide not to, you know, they don't want to be crucified on that cross, if you will.
Well, they don't
You
want
know?
to die on the hill, but like for me, if there was ever a hill to die on, not as a martyr, I'm not talking about martyrdom, but if there was ever a hill to die on, it's about our personal health and our sovereignty of our being.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the masks that we wear, there's such symbology in this theater. There's such symbology here. You know, we're literally being masked so that we don't express, so that we don't respire, so that we don't have respiration. I mean, the signals could not be more clear, and it actually has nothing to do with conspiracy. The greatest place for a conspiracy to, quote, hide is in plain sight. You can look around. 60% of people in a store don't wear masks. 40% do. You know, maybe that changes depending on what city you're in. So there's a philosophical and really a heart question inside of his question, Marlon's question, right?
Yeah.
Marlon asked a question from his heart. He's not, for me, that wasn't a scientific question. That was a question that he asked because he has a genuine concern and a genuine curiosity about what the hell is going on here, why we allow this to continue.
Yeah. It also just brings up, I just want to mention that we started talking about Hawaii and the Ha'ole, without breath. And it's just interesting. There is something about that where we're not sharing breath. And we were talking about how the breath weaves us all together, connects us. Another thing is when you were mentioning the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, not sure, I probably have the book right over here. It's Stephen Porges with the polyvagal theory.
The polyvagal theory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing about that is he includes in the what is this, not the vagus nerve, or that innervates the face and the facial,
yes, the micro muscles in the face. Yes.
Yeah. So that's another part of our nervous system. It's also a part of how we communicate. And it also, to me, shows that we have parasympathetic and sympathetic that work primarily inside our body. And then this other one that triggers the mirror neurons in you. So it communicates, you know, from my body to yours, you know, showing that there is this connection. But I guess like there's more to the psychology of the masks. Even it doesn't matter, like we could go into like what are their intentions, what did they hope to get out of all of it, but beyond that, it's what is it doing to the psychology of our species, whether we all were together and thinking it was a great idea and then realized, you know, some of the unintended consequences or not. It is interesting. It is this thing that blocks us from being able to see one another and connect in a very, very primal way. And then also the breathing, you know, that signal to our own nervous system, that one way, the one autonomic lever, as you were saying before. So I completely understand why it would come up for you that we're moving into a world. So how old's your son?
He's 4 months.
4 months old. We're moving into a world. I have a 6-year-old daughter and 2-year-old boys. My daughter, you know, going to school, started having to wear her mask. We're in Tennessee now, so that went away after a little while. But then just seeing how this has progressed, it always makes you wonder, is that going to be the normal that everyone's talking about? What's the new normal going to be? Is it going to be...
Not in my world.
Good,
yeah,
good.
Not in my world.
So my thought in that is you started with wellness force, and you were probably talking about wellness in one way, and then as we were talking about before, your soul was speaking to you, knocking on that door before you slammed that cup down. But then it kept speaking as you started leaning into it and saying, yes, it kept speaking. Do you feel it is now with your content creation, your media company, asking you to be a little bit more vocal about how this applies out to society, not just individuals, but is this something you're feeling a direction of?
So much so that I had to like calm myself down because I want to like stand up and scream. I mean, the answer is a resounding yes, because like I just received firearms training. Like we are having meetings here in Austin about community and about taking care of each other if things get really crazy. And this isn't about me scaring anyone. I'm not here to scare anyone. What I'm saying is, if you look at, there's a really radical book, and I have it right here. I've been reading it for a while, and it's called The Fourth Turning. And The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And they talk about every 80 years or so, we have a massive societal meltdown, either economic or war or something that divides people. We're fucking there. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care what your beliefs are. I don't care if you attach to these man-made things like Republican, Democrat, left, right, all these divisive language pieces. None of that really has none of that has any matter for me. What we're really looking at here is we're at the precipice of something really big right now. And how we act and our way of being right now as it relates to bodily autonomy and freedom and health freedom, that will be my child's life. That will be his children's life. What will be deemed normal. And that phrase is really disgusting to me, because normal is beauty and normal is love and freedom. That's normal. That is our God-given birthright normal. We are born well. We are born free. We forget that we are, and we spend our life remembering that. But people have forgotten. So people essentially, sometimes love can really inspire people to wake up, and sometimes it can't. And so I can't spend my time worrying about the people that don't want to transcend, that don't want to awaken, that maybe aren't watching your podcast, or maybe you're scared by the thought of awakening. Maybe they don't even like that thought or like that way of being. But the time is now. Like, what's in this book is so potent and so powerful, and the concepts that we're all having to look at, we're taking a big emotional inventory. We're looking in the mirror right now, Ben, of how we're showing up, how we lead our lives, the money we spend, the choices we make, the food that we eat, the people that we hang out with. All of this is either moving us closer to peace and love and connectedness and togetherness, or we're forced to believe another narrative where it's like, do what you're told, wear a mask, sit down, be quiet, take care of you and your family, forget everyone else. There's no such thing as community. And by the way, it's the left, or by the way, it's the right. These are the people that are your enemies. You must listen to me. Like, that's what's going on. That's what's truly going on. And if you guys can't see that, I need you to take a big, deep belly breath, pull 30,000 feet above the world, and take an honest, heart-based inventory of what the fuck is going on right now. Because what the fuck is going on right now is people are being divided and controlled in a way that's so profound. It reminds me of World War II. And it would be a disgrace and a dishonor to our fucking ancestors for us to pretend like everything's okay and just do what we're told and just follow the path. Because all of that is bullshit. That's exactly what 80 plus years ago people believed. And look what happened. That's how Hitler and Mussolini came to power. Yeah. So that's where we are.
You know, thank you for putting that so bluntly. I'm really, honestly, like, I'm really glad that as an influencer, as I've seen the progression of what you are putting out there, that you're allowing yourself to pivot also, and because the world is calling for it. You know, a lot of the times we don't understand what our skills are for until the world calls for it. And so I appreciate that. Also, with the fourth turning, chapter 6, the main thing they talk about in that book, well, one of the main things in that chapter that I took from it, at least, was during crisis periods, it draws the masses back into the political paradigm, whereas in the previous one, the unraveling, which is the fall, the autumn, and that's for, you know, that was all the way up until about 2008, starting, you know, roughly 82, 83 or something like that for millennials. That's when you notice the Nirvana, the Rage Against the Machine, which apparently just became Rage on Behalf of the Machine.
Exactly.
You know, so
who's paradoxically having people wear masks at their concert. I'm like, what world are we living in?
Rage on Behalf of the Machine.
Rage with your mask on is the new name of their band.
Finding out the Easter Bunny's
Rage with your
fake.
mask on.
Oh my God. You know, so with that being said, it also shows you that, like, you know, man, I grew up on Rage Against the Machine. It was a pivotal band in the, like, you talk about Tool, Marilyn Manson, Nine Inch Nails, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Korn, yes, but like you think of what is the thing that's happening here? What's being implied by all these bands? Like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Like, that was the mantra of the 90s. It was the unraveling. Now what's happening? I know so many conspiracy theorists because I just went through that phase in 2000, 2008, 2009, making these films. I had all these people that were like, the entire political, agenda, it's just a sham. The whole left-right thing, it's just there to get you hypnotized into a system so the mainstream media can monetize and keep your attention. And then a few years later, they're like, did you know Trump is secretly trying to save us from behind the scenes? And other people like, no, man, they're all pedophiles and blah, blah, blah. But, to me, have you noticed people got deeper back into the old paradigm because of that feeling, maybe because of the feeling of safety, that feeling of like, everyone's like willing to be cocky and bold when there's no bigger predators around. And then there's cocky and bold people, a bigger predator comes by and they diminish their posture and they sink back behind their daddy. Yeah. So it almost seems like that's what maybe.
I think part of it too is also just like desperation. I mean, I think we're getting to a point where things are accelerating so much and people don't know exactly what to do with their time and energy. So they're trying to find whatever they think is the best use of it. And sometimes that might not be, but a lot of people, they're looking at the clock, so to speak, and they're saying, what can I do? I'm getting desperate. On the left or the right, there's this existential angst. And for a lot of people who weren't political, they found identity, they found some sense of purpose, and like they were helping, and not because they were desperate. And they still are. I mean, you talk to most kids, younger than the millennial generation now, they feel this real sense of nihilism or apathy because they're like, I want to do something. I know I'm here to do something, but like I don't know what to do. The system seems so broken at this point, and I'm left holding this bag of just like, it's like being born with like a shit ton of debt kind of a thing.
I have real world proof of that. I mean, it breaks my heart. My nephew, I talked to him about some of these things in a way that I think would be safe to talk to him about. And his response was, yeah, I just try not to think about that stuff. I mean, that's literally what they're being taught in schools, right?
Right.
Like, we don't need to make this show about race, but the critical race theory and the things that are being stuffed down children's throats right now, it makes me really sad. And I'll tell you what, I will never have my child in a public school. Hell no. And I would be even careful to have my child in a Waldorf school at this point. Some of the Waldorf schools here in Texas have bowed down and they have made their children wear masks. So we all need to be very cautious. Not from fear. I'm not here to be like, we need to be afraid. What I'm saying is we need to be aware. That's all I'm saying. It is our duty to be aware of what's going on and to take an objective view of both sides of the coin and make an honest decision from our heart's wisdom about which one is the right path. This left-right conversation, this divisional conversation, it's been going on since the dawn of time. I mean, look at bread and circus in Roman times, right? Mm-hmm. We would watch the gladiators. We would get fed just enough bread to keep us occupied. Meanwhile, everything that was going on in society was totally about to collapse the society. We're there. Like, we're right there.
Yeah.
TikTok is not going to save you. Like, these things that we're distracted by, they're not going to put money in your bank, food in your children's mouths, or make you healthy. It is our deep calling as people to rise to the occasion here. And sometimes rising to the occasion means you have to explore a full palette of emotions. You can't just be Zen master all the time, fucking floating around like, oh, I'll take the higher road. It doesn't work. Now, granted, like we don't want to lead with anger and fear, but sometimes anger is necessary. Sometimes anger can be a very sacred, powerful emotion. And I think a lot of us are being at the boiling point now. A lot of us are being so pushed and so prodded and so muzzled and so affected in such an insane way that anger is coming. It's if you check into the existential angst that you were talking about, most people are feeling that every single day. It's out there right here in Texas, and this is supposed to be the land of the free. So it's in every society, it's in every conversation, but it's those that have the breath to calm themselves, take stock of what's going on, and then use your sacred anger from that place. Don't just wail around your sacred anger without any kind of logic, without any kind of guidance. We have so many people that are trying to sedate anger right now. And I think that now is our time to be angry. We're past the point of acceptance. We're way beyond that point. So now is the time for sacred anger.
Yeah. I mean, I think community is huge. I mean, I would love to hear you guys both talk on this. Ben, I know you probably have a question, but this really just like the solution that keeps coming up on a lot of these conversations is community and what you guys are doing with the activation summit coming up, like these kind of concepts. I think this is happening all over the world, and it's about more and more like-minded people coming together, showing proof of concept. People are ready for direct action. They need I'm all about leaderless movements, but leaderless movements also, you need to have some sort of sense of direction, right? Some sort of framework or philosophy or ideology, but like something to help, as you said, channel that anger in a healthy, effective way, you know. But people are ready to do things and build things. But, you know, I'd love to hear more about just kind of things you guys got going on and talking about that more. But go ahead, Ben, with your question as well.
Well, that activation summit thing that you sent, that was something that I actually just sent to you, Josh, this morning. That's something that my wife is putting together, Barbara, along with a woman named Olivia. And they both had experience with this. And I've, you know, in my travels, especially when I was touring through Europe, I actually stayed in a bunch of communities and I saw a lot of examples of things that work. And I saw a lot of examples of things that don't work. And actually, Jamie Wheel's most recent book, Recapture the Rapture, he talks about, you know, what makes a cult. And he also kind of clarifies, like, you know, listen, like, the ideal of a cult is not that far off from what we're talking about when we're talking about community. But there's certain types of leadership, and that's the thing. There's a structure around it where he says somebody grabs the ring of power, like I am the, and whatever, fill in whatever, you know, title you want on that, and then that one person has access to all the ladies and, you know, all those types of things. Which usually starts becoming some of the biggest problems of it, and also boundaries and not communicating these things. So I'm curious, and I would love to hear from you, Josh, because we haven't even talked about that activation summit. It's going to be a who's who on November 13th in Dripping Springs, and a smaller group, but we're going to have, you know, some who's who that can speak to this. Kyle Kingsbury is going to be out there. I'm going to speak. He's going to speak. My wife's going to speak. Hopefully we're going to screen something really short there, but I would love to know your thoughts on the best use of a community as potentially, let me just throw a couple names on it, like something that can also second as our spiritual path, that can be mirrors into who we truly are, that can keep us in check, like checks and balances for ourselves. What have you found, and what have you had to do in the past? Because this goes all the way back to our first question. When you ran home 3 miles drunk and typed into the computer, you know, I want to get healthy, like what are the ways? And you found Paul Chek and you found some other mentors. What are you seeing now is the best thing that is maybe not the glue that will hold the community together, but ways we can start initiating the building of the world that we would like to see, rendering obsolete this old paradigm that, you know, half the people don't even believe what they are, let's say, acquiescing to or consenting to. Half the people don't even believe what they're consenting to. So I would love to know from you, what do you see is the best way we can feel called into community, not chased away from the old world, right? Not fleeing in fear, but arriving because you feel called.
We need to develop the leader in ourselves from a integrated ego perspective.
Explain.
That's the bedrock for what I'll extrapolate. So ego integration is where you're not at war with your ego. You're not trying to kick the ego's ass or be angry at the ego. There's so much in our world right now, Ben, and I know you've done so many interviews about this with spiritual people. There seems to be this trend like we need to get rid of the ego, and it's just a fucking lie. Like the ego is there to guide us. What would soup, what would society, what would food be like if there was zero seasoning? If there was no complexity in the taste, we would all be automatons. So an ego left unchecked is an ego that goes around and gathers all the women and claims the ring of power. That's an unintegrated ego. And I believe, this is from my perspective, in 4 months of fatherhood, more and more and more it's coming online for me, and I'm feeling it so fucking profoundly in this moment with you. I believe that true leadership comes from fully integrated egos of mothers and fathers, because those are the people in our society that know how to bring life into the world, how to steward life, and how to steward a family. And guess what? The virtues and the values and the ways of being in a family and community, they're a mirror. They're a mirror. So if we're being loving, and to the best of our ability, ego integrated mothers and fathers, then those same exact things is what we apply to community. And I think that's where we begin, from that place. And of course, before we get there, Ben, all the work, which sometimes can be years, decades, a lifetime of integrating one's ego to a point where it's healthy enough to lead others without projection onto others, without misusing or misguiding or hurting other people. I think that parenthood is the fastest track to get to that place. And that's why you see, guess what? One of the biggest things that happened during the lockdown was pregnancies and births. There was a lot. I mean, Nova's one of them, right? We were forced to be with one another. We were pressurized in a capsule of lockdown. And so we did what humans do, and that is we multiply. And so the children that are coming into the world right now, my son may be a father himself. I hope he is. It's his path. But the key for us here with community is that we have to become an integrated human being, both man or woman, or however you identify, right? Because this is one thing too, is I made a joke earlier about, how I identify. That's a whole nother podcast. I do want to say this one thing. However you identify is totally cool. And if you deem yourself worthy to lead other people, as long as you're not projecting your wound of how you identify onto other people, awesome. Then you can be a fully integrated leader. And if you want to have children, that's fine too. Everybody's welcome at the table, but the table deserves and demands integration. Because if we're not integrated and we're sitting at the table and we have somebody trying to steal all the bread or steal all the women or control things from an unconscious, like completely disconnected heart space, that's going to fuck up the community. That's what's going on with our world. We have a bunch of unintegrated men and unintegrated women who are leading things, and their compass is cracked. Their lens is literally cracked, and they're projecting all of their trauma and all of their non-integration onto the community that is here. So I do believe, man, chaos to order. I know I've said that a few times on this podcast, but within myself, within us, within everyone here, what's happening for us is screaming for integration. It's like integration through a bullhorn. Like, that's the one thing that I would share about community is let's sit at round tables, let's have discussion about integration, and let's be very, very lovingly mindful of when we notice or when we're aware of people in leadership positions that are not integrated. And that can be a very challenging thing to do if the viewer or the watcher is not integrated themselves.
Such a good point. It just makes me feel that the thing about becoming a species of integrated, fully integrated egos, fully integrated human beings, really calls us to a higher level. Whereas when we're simply working off data and thinking that humans don't know how to take care of themselves, we can't guide them in any other ways than strictly enforced mandates, for one, things that across the board must be done. To me, I always look at it as like, just a little bit more pressure to an already fragile society is going to create a lot of these strange unintended consequences. And I also feel like that's a lot of what's happening right now. But the unintegrated aspects of us are also those things that I feel like what is driving a lot of people into the left-right paradigm is they're trying to gain understanding of what they're recognizing is being lost. Let's say the freedoms that are being lost, or the normal that is coming into view. They're just starting to come to understand it, but they're coming to understand it through a narrative feed that's from the old paradigm. So I really appreciate and I really encourage you specifically to keep moving in this direction. I can tell you're listening to something deeper than just what's the timely trend. There's also this timeless thing that's echoing in the background. And I love it. And what I love about you as an interviewer, I have to mention, is you track well. When I was on your podcast, and I would, I actually wasn't tangenting too hard that day, but you were tracking real well and bringing me back to certain points that, could be expressed a little more, or maybe that, on the tangent, a point wasn't made. And I dig that. And I think that blowing that up macrocosmically, you also track well to the original reason that set you off into Wellness Force as well, which makes it a strong and powerful and recognizable brand. But I also acknowledge that the logical way for something like that to grow and not be hemmed in by its own confines is to start talking societally, macroscopically. So I appreciate you for doing that. I want to honor that. I also want to.
Feels good to receive that from you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, dude. And, you know, I see this also because I value this path in myself. And my inner parent who's standing over my own shoulder all the time it keeps correcting me in those little ways. Like, Ben, are you honoring what set you off in this path in the first place? Because as a filmmaker, when I first started making films, I did not have a business plan in mind. I just knew I had to communicate something in a very specific way to humanity. And that it's not that I don't let that leave me. If it wants to leave, then it's gone. But it keeps whispering and I keep listening. So without me taking up too much time, I really want to ask then, as we're kind of like moving towards the logical big bang of this conversation, is where now for you, and what's next for Wellness Force, and also for Josh Trent, your father now. Things are expanding in many ways. I myself know exactly when you put that in tandem with, growing a business and moving according to an aligned path. It's a lot to juggle, but I see that you have a clear vision. So what now? Let the audience in on that and how they can make sure that they find what it is you're doing and how they can follow you.
I'm aware enough to know that my evolution as an interviewer and my evolution as a wellness enthusiast, somebody that just deeply cares, deeply curious, wants to know why, wants to know how, wants to gain intelligence. And I'll frame it in this way. I gather, I apply, and then I embody, because that is my journey. That's all of our journey. We listen to podcasts, we go buy books, we try things on, we do different breath practices, we apply it. But what we're all searching for, and what I'm searching for myself, honestly, is embodiment. And so for me to rise to the embodiment that I'm being called for, it's about me teaching, it's about me instructing, it's about me leading my community in a brand new way, where my heart is actually here with the people and I'm not just interviewing others. So one of the great things I love about what I do is that I get to learn and I get to share others' wisdom. But it's been few and far between that solo casts are a focus of Wellness Force. And they do really well. They get just as many downloads and just as much attention, which tells me, not from an ego place, but from a place of service, that that's needed too. And that's going to be really important. So the next phase of Wellness Force is me sharing, teaching, instructing more than just the Breathe, Breath, and Wellness program, but in doing broadcasts where I'm actually presenting a concept, teaching a concept, getting questions from people, and leading people towards the answers that are already inside of themselves. That's the next level. That's the embodiment that is being really, that's the embodiment that's pulling me forward.
I love that. And as a media house now, you're pumping out a lot of good content as a media house.
Literally, I produce it from my house.
Totally.
It's the media house.
It is the media house. And as you're building towards that larger library of content, I sense, and I know that we briefly talked about this. I don't know how much you remember. It was just through text.
Yeah.
But your organizational skills and also the fact that you have put protocols and courses together, I can see that in a larger setting, the content that you're also building towards, man, in 5 years, I don't know how many podcasts that you'll have, solo casts that you'll have, other kinds of content that you would have happened upon doing. But, what's beautiful about that is definitely you got to keep going in that direction, because that will also become the epiphenomena that helps call you deeper into that future. That's what I'm noticing now, is looking at a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Well, how many, if I stay true to the veracity at which Gordo and I are pumping out content, what are we going to have at that point? What should the platform look like? What should the navigatability, if that's even the right word to put to it?
I think so. Yeah.
Navigability. What
strategic.
Strategic, yeah.
Yes, yes.
How are you going to like set up an experience for people to move into it? Because at the brick and mortar stores, which
Sure.
maybe will never be a complete thing of the past, but
Yeah.
is moving in that direction for sure. It's like the entrance to Walmart. You got a lot of rectangles in there. The
Yeah.
entrance to some stores, it feels like an egg opening up, and you're walking in, and it's like this experience. So, with that being said, I appreciate the direction that you're moving. I like how grounded in wellness it is, and it's grounded in a lot of practicalities as well as touching upon some of what people would now term as woo-woo, which I love, or spirituality, which I
Mhm.
love, and all of these things, because the bottom line is if you look at things that are outside your comfort zone and research it, it's going to crack open that conditioned zoo animal a little bit more.
I love it.
So with that, I want to ask one more question. Family man, dadhood. I want to know what this has taught you and what this has brought to the table for you as far as an influencer, specifically in what you're working towards in the world. How has dadhood put a little asterisk on that hero's journey?
Well, man, your question, made me kind of tear up a little bit because I really understand more of what love is as a father. Like when I think about my son, like I miss him, and I do everything for my family. And I have a really big heart, and I think that being a father has cracked open a part of my heart. It's almost really, in a way, almost like a rock hound or a miner goes into a cave and they pound out the rocks to create more spaciousness, and they find diamonds in there. Like, that's what it feels like for me as a father. It feels like having a child and caring for a child and learning the complexities of life and how to deal with the complexities of life, how to calibrate my compass, how to focus on my expansion and my healing, how to be a present father, how to be a great lover, how to be a businessman. I mean, the complexity is fucking wild. It's wild. And I'm grateful for all of it in a way that I can't perfectly articulate, but I think you can feel it because it produces that emotion in me. And that emotion is connected to what I believe to be true, and that is the wisdom of my heart. And so it feels really good to be in this place to have my heart direct me instead of just my mind, because that heart is what makes me feel sacred anger. It's what allows me to have sadness, and we have to honor our sadness. It's what allows me to have the protection for my family and do whatever is necessary, like whether it's firearms training or saving or investing or gathering. Like, being a father and being a parent is a sacred thing. And too much people step into parenthood just hoping it works out, or crossing their fingers. And like that, I'm not shaming people that do that, but you're really dishonoring the sacredness of being a parent, because the sacredness of being a parent is calling forth your absolute best self, not from a place of shaming people that aren't, or not from making people wrong, but like being a parent is calling me forth to hold even more love, even more love, even more understanding, even more appreciation, and even more anger. All of these things. So that's what fatherhood is to me.
Beautiful. I can vibe on that. As a father, my children are teachers that I will actually listen to.
Yes.
I've resisted a lot of teachers in my day, especially the ones that wanted to be my teacher. Right? I resist anyone telling me shit a lot of the times. Like that's annoyed people in my bands, and I just have this resistance. But it's interesting when you make the choice, because I made the choice to become a father. I embraced it before it even happened, and seeing these children and seeing the fact that they get it. Like, they can't put it into language like I can, but they're smarter than me, and they get it, and they see all the shit that I'm trying to hide from myself, all the things that I try and step into. No, I'm dad. I've been around a lot longer than you.
Yes.
It's interesting. They like teachers are born all the time until we condition them.
I know. I hear you, man. I hear you and I feel you. And there's really no way to explain it unless you have the experience of understanding it and being through it. So for all the people that aren't parents, you know, if that's your calling, wonderful. If it's not your calling, that's fine too. But there's something incredibly powerful and special that can't really be perfectly articulated. You have to just feel it. You have to go through it.
For sure. For sure. Please let the audience know where they can find you, just anything that might be coming up here in the near future for you, something that you would like to announce, and just, you know, lay it on them.
If you resonate with what the three of us have talked about today, then head over to wellnessforce.com, because there is so much there for you, so much to explore with, I believe, some of the most intelligent minds, but also the most intelligent hearts out there in the world. You can break down our 9 categories. You can peruse our podcast. They're all free. You know, you don't have to pay anything for any of it. And then if that resonates with you and you want to go even deeper, sign up for our email list. You can just go to wellnessforce.com/M21. That's the M21 system that I built. You know, Ben, I've done like 400 plus interviews, and I'm like, what's the juice? What's the thing that really matters? What are the practices that really will move the needle for you? And I put them into a guide. It's free. It's a wonderful way to start your day. You can do that in less than 21 minutes. There's breath work in that guide. That'll give you access to our community. And then in the future, in 2022, we're creating the round circle, right? We're bringing people to the table where people can actually show up, ask questions, share, and learn, and I can help guide and facilitate that. So that's what I'm most excited about, is that. And I'm also unattached to exactly what it looks like, right? And I think that's the mark of like the mystery, as you talked about. What is mystical about this? This life is so mysterious. So if you believe that, come over to wellnessforce.com and honor the mystery with us, honor the intelligence in us all.
Beautiful. My brother. And I say that deeply as well, my brother. I feel it. I felt it from the first time that we connected. And I was going through a dark night of the soul when we first connected. I don't know if you remember.
That's right. I do remember.
And
you were leaving Gaia at the time.
I had just left Gaia.
That's right.
And, you know, without rehashing the whole story, there was a thought that I wasn't leaving Gaia. I was transitioning from an in-house producer to a host, and then the host thing fell through after I left the in-house producer side. Just had twin boys, because of the no job, couldn't get an apartment, ended up in a friend's basement. It was just like as many kicks to the nuts as a father could get.
Yeah.
And I you know, only on this end of it can I look at that and be like, thank God. You know, thank God. So yeah, I was going through that when we first met, and I felt it. And interestingly enough, you intuited, you know, well, like, we got this connection. Let's connect again when the spark is mature enough to want to explode. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't for a little while, and then eventually it did. And I'm very glad it did, man. I love the work that you're putting out in the world. I love the tiny nuances and distinctions between my work and yours, and how they complement one another. So I got to say thank you for all the time that I know you're putting into time and energy and resources that you're putting into all the content, the organized way that you're putting out for the audience. So thank you. Everyone, please go to wellnessforce.com. Please do the breath. What is that course called again?
Well, it's the Breathe, Breath, and Wellness program. And if you want to get right on that, it's breathwork.io. But you can go and get the free guide, which has an initial breathwork practice inside of it for free. And that's wellnessforce.com/M21.
M21. Beautiful, beautiful. Mm-hmm. And that's on the page. I also want to say thank you to Shaman Shed. We had a great, we had a lot of engagement here, but Shaman Shed donated $5 and said, superb podcast tonight. Thanks, Ben, Gordo, and Josh. Really, I want to say that, like, not only do I appreciate what you're putting out there, I appreciate the direction that you're going in, and the fact that you're also a shining example of honoring that inner direction that's calling to you. I don't always need to fully agree with and understand somebody to honor that they're following the path they were set out to follow. But it turns out there's both of those elements in there. So I appreciate that. Man in arms. And also we are this hero's journey that's before us, it seems like a lot of people are woken up to the same path, and we're bumping into each other on this long journey. So thank you for that. Gordo, you're also on that path, man. Thank you for bumping into it.
For sure.
I met Gordo at Gaia. So with that being said and wrapping up, I just want to say thank you to the audience, because I'm sure Josh and Gordo will all agree that one of the biggest reasons we do it is because of you. And one of the greatest lessons that we get out of it is all of us being reflected back to us by you. This teaches us so much. This is part of exactly what Josh was saying earlier. And for me, throughout my films, it's all of the critics out there that have caused for me to double down, triple down on my research, not my beliefs, but on my pursuit of that which is unfolding within. I hope you're doing it as well at home. I hope you're feeling that force of wellness that Josh was talking about earlier. I love you all. We do this every Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. We're live so we can engage with the audience. Mondays, Waking Infinity. We have deeper dives over at benjosephstewart.com. I'm very soon going to start having extended, they're really short documentaries, but extended interviews I've done with people for members only. There's a lot more coming. Friday nights, I have acoustic nights, and who knows, maybe I'll start a circus one of these days.
Nice.
I love all of you. Thank you, Josh, so much for your heart, for everything that you're doing. I love you, the audience, and I'll catch you guys next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.